Reptilian shapeshifters are behind ISIS, the Federal Reserve and Sesame Street. This is the False Flag Nation podcast.
And welcome back to another episode of False Flag Nation, the podcast where we delve into conspiracy theories, the occult, the paranormal, and all things esoteric. My name is Joseph DeMarco. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, William Revere. Can you hear me, Will?
Loud and clear, loud and clear.
All right, very good. We've got a little bit of news to get out of the way first, and then we're going to delve into some pretty heavy shit, a little dark even for this show, but it's a pretty fascinating topic, and it's one that kind of keeps coming up the more you delve into this the darker end of the conspiracy world. Would you enlighten us about what that is, Will?
Yeah, definitely. You put it perfectly. This is a dark topic, but this is at the center of a lot of the secret societies that we're investigating and dealing with. So tonight's topic is going to be focusing around the satanic occult side of the secret societies that we deal with, and specifically their involvement in child sacrifices. So, like I said, very deep stuff, very disturbing, but we have to tackle this topic as it's important for everyone to understand.
Yeah, and a lot of the stories deal with allegations of kidnapping and genocide in various locations around the world. Things that on the surface don't seem to be connected, but if you do some digging, there seems to be a pattern or a sort of sinister connection to these events that.
Definitely.
We're going to be exploring whether or not there's any veracity to that on this show. So hopefully we can work some laughs into this, but we'll do our best. We'll try and work some in. But before we delve into all that shit, we got a little bit of news to get out of the way. Yesterday was Super Bowl 50.
Yeah.
And we
kind of uneventful, right?
Yeah, this year we were fully prepared for a halftime show full of insane, bizarre symbolism and rituals. Like last year, we had Katy Perry, the whore of Babylon, riding the great lion beast, and her cadre of Lovecraftian fish people dancing around her. Invoking some sort of grand spectacle, but there really wasn't any of that going on this year. It was very subdued. I was very surprised.
Yeah, I mean, last year, compared to the Masonic chessboard,
that's right,
the demonic chess pieces, this year was just pretty bad. I mean, with the exception of Bruno Mars, who's very talented. It was a boring, just lackluster performance.
Well, I mean, there were a couple things like the Sanskrit writing on the drums of Coldplay and the sound equipment. Who knows what that could have meant?
Right. Our translators have not yet gotten that back to us. So
yeah,
something we're working on.
Team of linguists is hard at work on it as we speak. There was the cross pattern on the stage. Clearly, the work of the Knights Templar. Hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
But, I think, I guess last year was just way too vulgar and overt, and too many people caught on, because there was that Vigilant Citizen article about it, like the next day. Like, I don't think, within 6 hours, I mean, there were half a dozen shows up on YouTube
Definitely. Yeah.
deconstructing like every single act within the halftime show. So like, I think they pushed it a little too far last year, and they realized they had to dial it back. So they
Right.
just went with a pretty mundane, boring performance. It wasn't an exciting game either.
No, that was the other part. I mean, I turned it off halfway, so I really didn't
Yeah.
even know what was going on. But it was just all around boring.
Yeah, but it's if you're gonna do any kind of subliminal programming, there's no better platform than a show that attracts more viewers than probably anything else over the course of the year. That's like tens of millions, probably like hundreds of millions of viewers.
Oh,
The
certainly.
Super Bowl. So I think in the past that's why they put all this bizarre shit in the show. But not this year. I guess maybe they've got something grander planned
Yeah, I
for
mean
the
that was the
election. Who
thing
knows?
too. We were actually interpreting last year's Katy Perry halftime show as some sort of live ritual, but we definitely didn't get that aspect of this year's program. So
Yeah.
uh, who knows? I mean, maybe they were sacrificing children behind the stadium or something like.
I don't think so, but
Let's hope not.
what? Anything else going on in news before we jump into this? I have a story, but it's I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, kind of boring this week. Nothing much going on. Why don't you enlighten us
Well,
with your tale?
we have the not the Iowa caught the New Hampshire primaries are tomorrow, so we're going to be following that as always. Donald Trump is still in the lead with the Republican side. Marco Bot got absolutely curb stomped by Chris Christie during the debate uh, on Saturday night. Like he just kept calling out how he just repeats talking points, and Marco Rubio just used the same speech like four times
Right.
because he didn't know what to say, and then uh, Christie calls him out while he's doing it. He's like there it excuse me, wow. He's like, there it is, the 25-second memorized speech, and Marco's like so
Yeah, he's a little dillweed.
after the debate, I'm sure he's crawling back to the Koch brothers throne room, hat in hand, begging for forgiveness. It's it's like you said, he's like Kylo Ren in the new Star Wars film, kneeling before that giant holographic Sith Lord. It's like he'll be summoning Marco back to the Sith homeworld to complete his training. It's like, you have disappointed me, apprentice.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I wish it wasn't true, but it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, now that you brought up the politics, pretty depressing news. Obviously, that Rand Paul, the only hope for America, has decided to drop out. Unfortunately.
Yeah. It's I did see that right after the primary. I mean, I was keeping it together pretty well until I saw that Rick Santorum had dropped out. Then I just
Yeah.
I couldn't I had to leave the room. I had to
Yeah.
get some air. But about Rand Paul, I do think I of all the candidates, I like his limited government approach the best. I am a libertarian at heart, but as I said in the last show, I think a lot of the support he was counting on went to Donald Trump, and he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time this year.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that there's a lot of people I would have liked to see drop out before him,
Right.
but
He also takes his Senate seat very seriously as well. So
yeah. Again, unlike Marco, was photographed going to a baseball game while it was skipping a vote.
yeah, I know the arguments that Chris Christie has made is that he's like a part-time senator.
Yeah. There's also the rumors he hung out at a park in Florida as a teenager frequented by gay prostitutes and went to gay foam parties.
I saw those pictures online. I did.
Those are stories floating around on Twitter right now. Check them out. If they're even 10% true, this election is gonna be a lot more interesting than it currently is.
That's for sure.
But, and said on a somewhat related note, interesting segue. The state of Michigan, which now that it just wrapped up poisoning its own people and its water supply, has just passed a bill outlawing all forms of anal and oral sex. Violators will face up to 15 years in prison.
Wow.
See, a lot of states have laws like this, but they're like these archaic laws written by the English colonial governor in the 1600s. But Michigan is passing this now in 2016. I guess
That's incredible.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure what to make of this or why they felt this was an issue that needed to be addressed so urgently. I guess there is an epidemic of just rampant sodomy and nonstop butt fucking in the state of Michigan. It's reaching Zika virus levels, proportions. But
yeah,
I'm glad they solved that problem.
Yeah, wouldn't you think that they would prioritize their problems?
I think they are. I mean, there's rampant, uncontrolled
blowjobs.
Yeah.
Wow.
Rampant, uncontrolled faggotry and all manners of abomination taking place. I don't know why I'm using that accent. It would be like an upper Midwest accent. It was like, that bumping of the donuts and all that backdoor faggotry there, and those bathhouse brawlers having their way with our culture and our society. No, we can't have any of that there. No, we're gonna make that. You get a little beach at the Dave Matthews Show. You're going away for 15 years, don't you know?
Isn't that just absurd?
Yeah.
At this day and age?
And the judge bangs the gavel, he'll laugh like the guys on Car Talk, like that's the end of you. And the ironic thing is, when they send people to prison for that, what do they think is going to happen in prison?
Yeah, you're right.
It's like the recidivism rate will skyrocket. It's just like when they send minors to jail and they spend time with other criminals and they just learn how to break into houses and commit other crimes once they're in.
You're right. We need to re-educate them. That's a problem.
And it all links back to the privatized prison complex.
You're right.
They need to keep them filled.
So they make bullshit laws.
Yeah. Some states use the war on drugs. Michigan prefers the war on buggery. So, on that note, shall we dive into our main topic for the evening?
Yeah, wow. We're going to go 0 to 100 here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I commend you for hanging in there for the last 13 minutes, folks. It's about to get so much worse.
Like you said, we had to go into this with a little bit of humor.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so we'll start us off here. Give us a little bit of background on this topic, and I mean, how do we begin to tackle a topic like this?
Yeah, here's the thing. We've made comments, and I know I have in the past, of the world elite devouring children behind closed doors and whatnot.
Yeah,
and that had always been said in somewhat tongue-in-cheek fashion. Mm-hmm. However, upon diving into this topic and through my research, there certainly appears to be some truth to the child sacrifice and Satanism floating around the Vatican. And when you make a statement like that, because the Vatican is so involved in world policy, it really makes you scratch your head and wonder, you know, who else is involved. And I think that's a, you know, a valid point. So I think I'd like to start out a little bit with kind of making the case that uh, the Vatican, as it is now, is corrupted and has been for some time.
So
And
you've researched this and you believe this to be true, or are you just uh, going through things you found online and presenting them, and you have not made up your mind?
I am convinced only because of the sources that have pointed in that direction, and the sources are people. And I guess I'll start out first with, I know we've mentioned him in the past in our Amityville horror episode, but the one of my personal heroes, Dr. Malachi Martin,
Yeah.
who is or was a priest, and he was an expert in the occult, a world-renowned exorcist. Worked in the Vatican for 35 years. He was actually one of the original people to work on the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Really?
Yeah, so he was fluent in 13 languages, and he's a personal advisor to three different popes.
Wow.
His closest relationship was with Pope John Paul II. And one of the interesting things that he said, and this is a quote from him in conversation, he says, quote, "Indeed, Paul had alluded somberly to, quote, the smoke of Satan which has entered the sanctuary, an oblique reference to the enthronement ceremony by Satanists in the Vatican. Besides, the incident of satanic pedophilia, rites, and practices was already documented among certain bishops and priests as widely dispersed as Turin in Italy, South Carolina, and in the United States. The cultic acts of satanic pedophilia are considered by professionals to be the culmination of fallen archangels' rites." So this was from
This is Malachi Martin's words. He wrote this.
yes, uh, that's pretty impressive to say the least.
It's a pretty audacious claim,
Right.
to be making.
And the reason why I take it so seriously is because he did work directly with the popes, directly with the cardinals in highest levels of the Vatican. So I believe what he's saying. Another gentleman, Archbishop Malingo from Portugal, who spent years in the Vatican as well. He has a famous quote here too. He said, quote, "The devil in the Catholic Church is so protected now that it's like an animal protected by the government, put on a preserve that outlaws anyone, especially hunters, from trying to capture or kill it. The devil within the church today is actually protected by certain church authorities from the official devil hunter in the church, the exorcist." So this Portuguese bishop is making another assertion that there is widespread Satanism involved in highest levels of the Vatican.
Now, does this have something to do with specific sects or orders within the church? Like, I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories about the Jesuit order and things like that.
That's correct.
Oh, specifically the Jesuits? Or?
He does not reference specifically the Jesuits. However, in other articles and other people point towards the Jesuits because of the power that they have in the Vatican. And they're basically making the case that none of this could happen if either the Jesuits didn't allow it to happen, or they were actively involved in it. So
now is this something that has kicked into overdrive now that Pope Francis is on has assumed the papacy, because he is a Jesuit? He's the first Jesuit pope ever.
right.
And I know that was kind of the media they made something of a big deal out of it, but not really. I think most people don't even know what a Jesuit is.
Hmm.
But is the order more openly asserting its authority within the church now? Do you think, and is that related to the main topic of our discussion tonight?
I think it's partially related. Having a Jesuit pope certainly feeds the fire of the conspiracy theorists saying that the Jesuits control the CIA and the Jesuits control other world governments and shit like that. So I think there's some case to be made for that, but as we'll see, the sources that I have are pointing towards almost every pope in the past, at least over 100 years, as being involved directly in satanic ritual murders in the Vatican. Yeah, it's pretty heavy shit.
Okay, so you're throwing a lot at me here at once. So like, what? I need you to break this down into little more digestible pieces. Like, start with a specific claim. You've kind of given the big picture here, so let's look at the smaller pieces and connect the dots if we can.
Sure.
So what's the best place to start to effectively tell this story?
Let's first look at the genocide in Canada. Okay, now
those are not words most people connect in their mind. Genocide in Canada.
You're absolutely right about that. You think Canada, you think probably one of the most peaceful countries in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
However, we're learning the dark past of the Canadian government and its partnership with not only the Church of England, but the Vatican. So let's just grab the bull by the horns here and dive right into this. The International Common Law Court of Justice. Now, this is one of the sources that I'm going to be discussing, but this is one of those international courts that really make statements. And there are judges and there are legislative bodies involved. But, these are the kind of courts that claimed that President Bush and Cheney were guilty of war crimes and shit like that. So,
okay, because I mean,
do they have any actual power? Yeah, no, they don't.
The media covered that fairly extensively. Like, there's a couple regions and places in Europe where I think if Dick Cheney goes, he'll get arrested, like Donald Rumsfeld, etc. But this is that same court.
It's one of those types of courts, and this court is actually based out of Brussels.
Okay, so is this connected to like the International Criminal Court, like the Human Rights Court and whatnot?
It's not connected. It's a separate entity.
Okay,
but that's the gist of this body.
They just officially denounce things. They're not connected to an actual enforcement mechanism.
That's correct.
Okay, so.
However, that doesn't mean that they don't have money and they don't have the power to research and basically submit their findings to the world.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what they have done.
Okay.
So on February 25th, 2013, the Common Law Court officially named and indicted 30 defendants for perpetrating and concealing genocide in Canada against the indigenous people, or Indians, I guess, for lack of a better term. These defendants included then Pope Benedict, Joseph Ratzinger, former Cardinal Tarisio Bertoni, and Elizabeth Windsor, otherwise known as Queen of England, and also Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper. So they basically are calling these people out for covering up and their involvement in the mass murder of the Indigenous people in various parts of Canada, which I'll get into now. So during the late 1800s, mid 1800s, all the way up until the 1960s, Canada had an official partnership with not only the Roman Catholic Church, but interestingly enough, the Church of England, which is the Anglicans, and those religious entities would send representatives over to Canada to run what would be called the Indian residential school system. And basically, what these schools were set up to do was to literally kidnap or forcibly take younger children from the indigenous families or tribes in Canada. This is all over Alberta, Toronto, all over the place. And they would steal and kidnap these children and attempt to basically rid them of all their culture and turn them into Christian babies.
These were like residential schools that were designed to kind of forcibly assimilate them and like re-educate them to be proper, Canadians.
Exactly.
Okay.
But not only proper Canadians, but proper Roman Catholics or Anglicans.
Sure. And these schools were run by nuns or by the church directly or through a separate.
They were run in conjunction with the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of England, but there were also government officials at these schools.
Okay.
But it would not be uncommon for there to be a bunch of nuns, feeding the children, teaching them.
Yeah.
So the primary education roles were taken by the Catholic Church.
And what did they find there, and who found it?
What had happened was, and there's a couple eyewitness testimonies, but first off, in about 1900, Canada's first prime minister, John Macdonald, he was pointed out as officially ignoring a smallpox and tuberculosis event that occurred throughout a bunch of these different schools within 2 or 3 miles of each other. And he basically ignored the pleas of not only the parents that were able to luckily see their children, but some of the school officials. So the idea is that this John Macdonald, the Prime Minister of Canada, was basically creating these little death camps where the sick kids would go, and then they would gather more kids and send them to the infected areas, and they essentially just wiped whole generations of indigenous people off the face of the earth with old school bio warfare.
Yeah, so it seems like that was the official explanation for why there were so many of these students dying at the schools.
Right.
Things like smallpox and tuberculosis. That I guess back then it was certainly not easy to treat those diseases back then. This is like the late 1800s, early 1900s, and they're just dying by the hundreds.
Right.
There, but your research has suggested that there was something worse going on.
Yeah, that's definitely what the evidence is pointing at, and it's interesting to note that this wasn't just the 1800s. As recent as the 1960s, Canadians, they refer to what is called the 60s scoop, which was law enforcement along with officials from these regional schools going and there's reports of at gunpoint taking children from their homes as recently as the 1960s and bringing them to these regional schools. So it's pretty scary stuff. But like you were saying, there's one witness who has come forward, among others, but he has a particularly interesting story. William Combes, he's a Native American child who was one of the attendees of a school in British Columbia. And he is on record, and he has a sworn affidavit to have witnessed the Queen of England, along with Prince Charles, arriving in Canada to one of the schools that he attended, and he claims that he saw the Queen of England and her little posse choose 10 kids, and they claimed that they were going to go on a picnic. What had happened after that was basically the 10 kids that they chose never reappeared, and there was no sign of them ever again. So nobody ever knew what happened to them. Their families were looking for them, and there was no official explanation other than that they went for a picnic with the Queen of England. And that led to a whole bunch of stories of kidnapping, trafficking to Europe, and eventually allegations of not only torture, murder, and rape, but satanic sacrifice.
Now, I had heard a story you had told me a few days ago that they were that they had been various European royalty had been engaging in hunting parties, like a fox hunt.
That's correct.
On horseback, where they unleash the hounds, release the hounds. Here's the William Tell music.
Exactly.
I just where's how has this not come out? This is why I'm having a hard time with this story. It's not that I don't believe there's anything to it. It's just how could something so huge? And first of all, how many deaths are we talking about here? How many bodies have they found in these
in Canada
these burial sites? Are they a body here and there? Are they mass graves? What is this?
In Canada, there's reports of, and this has been officially announced. You can look at all the different Canadian newspapers and such. There were a couple different grave sites that had up to 26,000 bodies. So the total numbers are somewhere in the 300,000 range, which is pretty jaw-dropping.
Jesus. Now, this is what I'm talking about, just the sheer numbers involved. How could something like this not have leaked out sooner? Or why is the mainstream media covering it? I mean, unless you take into account the media is controlled by 6 companies, and who knows who controls those 6 companies? Maybe they're controlled by people involved in doing this. So
I don't think it's been ignored. In fact, I think at least in Canada, it has been targeted as a dirty past. There's a couple different news articles that have come up about it over the past 3 or 4 years, specifically addressing the fact that Canada has this kind of innocent world image, yet they're hiding in this dark secret.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Like you said, the media is controlled by a certain select few, and it's very dangerous once these stories start spiraling out. Who knows? It could affect individuals.
Yeah. Now, is this the only place where this has taken place, or is this in other countries as well?
There are reports of events like this taking place in not only North America, but Mexico and Europe as well. There's another interesting case in Ireland, which was brought up a couple years ago, and it involved a home in Ireland for unwed mothers.
Oh yes, you sent me this. Yeah,
Yeah,
this was
it-
like uh, home for like single women, I guess, who were poor that needed a
right.
place to stay, and then the church had their uh, ran this home where they could come with their child and presumably live for a while.
Yeah, that was the idea, which, on the surface is a great idea. However, uh, I believe in the 80s, there was some spark of interest, and eventually, a couple years ago, they found the bodies of almost 1,000 uh, babies and infants
Yeah.
that were buried in a old septic tank underneath the property.
What?
Right, and if that's not disturbing enough, a couple sources that we have here, Kevin Annette being one of them, uh, who was present when they were excavating and stuff, can attest to seemingly bodies being decapitated, limbs being removed, which are telltale signs of some sort of ritualistic slaughter, which is quite disturbing. So that's yet another bit of evidence pointing in the direction of satanic murder in relation to the Vatican.
No, I see some of these stories. The links you sent me here. I'm looking over this one more thoroughly. It says that these bodies were accumulated on the grounds of the property in the septic tank between 1925 and 1961. A lot of them appear to have perished from infectious diseases or malnutrition. There's eyewitness reports of seeing children who just did not look healthy. One quote says they were treated marginally better than the traveler children. The travelers are like gypsies,
Right.
and that they were being used for forced labor to
So and whatnot.
yeah. But you're saying that it looks like some of them were deliberately murdered.
That is what some of the evidence is pointing at. You know, the, there couldn't have been multiple cases of accidental decapitation at this one nunnery or home for the unwed mothers. It just seems kind of absurd. Um, it's something you have to research more, and more evidence is coming out each year about this specific case.
Yeah.
But it's just very strange that this would happen, period. And it's very important in the Catholic faith to have a proper burial. So why would you have these infants and young children being basically abandoned and tossed in a very disrespectful manner in a septic tank?
Yeah.
Pretty
It just seems like a lot of these rumors, I think, are just rumors. There's nothing to that. But when you're talking about these places like this, these locations in Canada and Ireland where they've actually found physical evidence,
That's
like
correct.
indisputable evidence that something went on there. There's just too much smoke for there to be no fire at all. Like there's something really bad happened, and then efforts were made to kind of hush it up
Right.
and sweep it under the rug, whether it is by secular authorities or at the behest of the whatever branch of the church was involved in running that organization. Who knows? But I guess the logical way to progress from here would be why is this happening? Is this
Right.
as you alluded to, is this part of some sick occult practice, or is this just are they covering up like horrific conditions and just negligence within these places?
Yeah, I mean those are interesting ideas. Certainly, the the believers in the satanic theory is that you know the idea behind a sacrifice in a satanic ritual is to take something that's very very innocent, which would be a child or a baby, and sacrifice it to not only show obedience but to show the level of your you know obsession, if you will, with uh, Satan. So that's the idea behind these ritual murders. So there's always been an obsession with the corruption of youth, and that's something that we have certainly seen in the Catholic Church over the past 10 years with the huge outbreak of cover up with the pedophilia rings.
Yeah.
And, I think this is just another peg in that wheel, if you will, that is being covered up right now.
Yeah. Well, this website, and I'm looking at childabuserecovery.com, which is a site I've never seen before. I don't know if this is a legitimate website, but it's linked. Same basic story as these other sources you sent me, that this court case in Brussels charged Pope Francis and other global elites for crimes against humanity and was expected to extend for over a year. The court's ruling found 40 global elites guilty and ended with the unprecedented resignation of Pope Ratzinger. That was not the official reason given for his resignation.
Right.
But
health reasons.
Yeah.
Which is the first time a pope has resigned for health reasons in 900 years.
Yeah. I don't see. I'm of two minds here. It seems like there's two ways to look at this whole thing. One is the theory that there is this kind of evil occult activity taking place, and the other that is there are just sexual deviants hiding within the church, and the church has been covering it up rather than publicly admitting that there's a problem, because I guess in going back to medieval times and stuff, ever since they eliminated the ability of priests to get married, the priesthood provided a convenient place for people who were gay, or if some of them were pedophiles. If it's a small town, no one's going to ask why is Jim the plumber's son not getting married. Or if he joined the priesthood, it's like, oh, it's because he was called to God. No one's going to call the priest of the town a sexual deviant.
Right.
Back during the Middle Ages, so it provided a convenient spot for someone who might be predisposed to abusing kids to just have a space where no one would suspect him. But that's not to say all of them are involved in that. Of course not. But it just I just don't know. I feel like I need to see more evidence. There needs to be more things to convince me of this occult thing going on. We have Malachi Martin's story, which is very intriguing. But what else is there to back this up?
There is, interestingly enough, something that I had not heard of before, and this was brought to light by a contact in the Vatican, supposedly. And this document was exposed to Kevin Annett, who is working with this international court. And it pertains specifically to a document and a entity called the magisterial privilege. And this apparently was basically this rite, if you will, explained that explained the role of child sacrifice and specifically the consumption of blood by high-level Jesuits and every pope from 1773 and on.
What is that document called again? For
It's called the magisterial privilege.
okay,
And this was something that was, again, supposedly made available to Kevin Annett, who's one of the head investigators for this international court.
okay.
So this would be basically the nail in the coffin, or the you know the glove, if you will, of connecting satanic ritual to the Jesuits and the Pope. So if this bit of information is actually accurate, and it was supposedly dated in 1967, and it was written in Latin. So I don't know if that aids to its credibility, but it's very interesting. So this is basically the piece of information that connects the Vatican to this kind of controlled satanic ritual.
So it seems like in the infrastructure of this whole thing are these religious orphanages and residential schools where these kids are being sent, and then some of them just disappear
Exactly.
for whatever insidious purpose the people running the schools have, and that those people include various figures within the church and various members of the nobility within Europe.
That's correct.
And within North America, if you do more research, it seems to indicate lots of the business and government elites in the United States. I think that's what this whole Ninth Circle secret society that Kevin Annett brings up in an interview with Alex Jones. That
Right.
was the basic gist of that whole thing. But so what why are more people not talking about this? If this is even a tenth as obscene as these claims are, why are more people not talking about this? How have they been so successful in covering up something so huge?
I think it's just that. I mean, this is. Uh, Imagine what. Well, you could see the damage that the exposure of the pedophilia in the Roman
Oh,
Catholic
sure, yeah.
did.
Like from a public relations standpoint, that's done a terrible amount of damage. But this is a lot worse than that. I mean, we're talking about actual deaths
Right.
here rather than just like molestation. Like this is like mass murder
I
we're
I,
talking about.
I think reason for the high level cover up is those parties involved. I mean, from the evidence that we're seeing, it points at least to uh, the theory that all at least some members of high level government from all different countries are involved in this, as well as media moguls, celebrities, and those who have sworn allegiance to the dark side, if you will.
Now, do you think this has any connection to these alleged human experimentation projects like MK Ultra, Project Monarch, and stuff that the CIA was doing during the mid 20th century?
Certainly could. It certainly could. I mean, uh, obviously, uh, this involves some level of psychological manipulation. So it certainly could be a connection between the two.
Yeah, so this is definitely a dark. I mean, if there is any veracity to this, and it's as I said before, things happened and attempts were made to cover it up. So that, by definition, is a conspiracy. It's not really a conspiracy theory anymore. The only thing we're theorizing about is how is the scale of it, and whether or not this whole occult aspect, there's anything to that. But at this point, with people like with a guy like Pope Francis on the throne currently, or in the pontiff's seat, who is seen by many as a reformer in the church, and his approval ratings are pretty high, even by people outside the church. They see him as someone that's fixing a lot of the problems, like with the financial transparency or lack thereof. He's auditing various organizations within the church and cracking down on corruption, or at least appears to be. Do you think that's all an act? Do you think this is the Jesuits consolidating their power? Do you think the Jesuits are in fact behind all this? As someone with a master's degree in religion, I hear an awful lot of uninformed opinions, but I want someone who has some background in this world to opine on this.
Right. I mean, here's my official opinion on this. I think that the church has been corrupted. I think that the Roman Catholic Church is, in its most raw element, a power for good. And undoubtedly, the Roman Catholic Church has been the number one provider for charity in the world. With that being said, there are elements of it that have certainly been corrupted, and there's been huge, widespread cover-up as well. I think at this point, there is a Jesuit takeover, and not all Jesuits are bad, but they are powerful, and they have a history of connections to other secret societies, including the Freemasons and Shriners. So just with that, there's elements of corruption, because, once you become a 33rd degree member of the Freemasons, you essentially denounce all levels of form of official religion.
Allegedly.
And
I know the Catholic Church to this day officially has a hostile policy towards the Freemasons.
that's correct.
I know you're not allowed to receive communion if you're a Mason, I believe, and whatnot. But then you see these theories that Pope Francis is a Mason, and that the Jesuits are a Masonic infiltration of the church. It's hard. There's so many of these stories that just and theories that contradict each other. It's hard to know what the fuck is going on.
It's true.
And which of these organizations is connected, to these atrocities that have been committed, or at least the cover up of
Right.
these things. If they're not doing it directly, they were probably involved in covering it up. The question is which group of people specifically.
Exactly, and I don't think you can isolate the Jesuits themselves as being, the culprits of all of this.
I'm not necessarily making that claim. I'm just saying, like, they're one of these organizations that always seem to come up in these conspiracy theories about the church.
Right.
But what do we do with this? Where do we go from here? We're almost out of time, but what do we? How can people educate themselves about this and spread the word about this topic, about these atrocities in Canada? Because this is something I had never heard of until you sent me this a week ago, and it's outrageous that more people don't know about this.
Yeah, I mean, this is stuff. Research is key. Looking it up, understanding on your own, and basically just spreading the word. Is there anything that we can do about it now? No, there isn't. But you can at least understand what happened and understand the danger of, a combination of religious hierarchy and government, and what that can do to vulnerable societies. So, everybody should have an understanding of this. Everybody understands the genocide in Europe during World War II. This is another one that happened right in North America. So do your research and try and learn as much as you can on this topic, because it's very interesting, and I'm sure there's going to be more coming up about this topic in the future.
Yeah, well, I hope the full truth, whatever it is about this, comes out, and the scrutiny is placed where it needs to be. So that it just seems like a lot of people have been getting off for things they shouldn't have been getting off for a long time, and hopefully within our lifetimes we find a way to hold them accountable for it. But looks like we are just about out of time. Did you have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap things up here, Will?
No, I think that's it. Like we said, this was a dark topic, but something that definitely needed to be addressed.
Yeah.
And, hopefully we'll do a funnier podcast next week.
Yes, we'll be back on a lighter note next week. And, that's the thing. When you go down this rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, eventually you come across something that's a little bit dark. Maybe you don't want to talk about it, but you have to. You have a responsibility to talk about topics you might find distasteful from time to time. But there's a lot going on in the world besides just this. As I said, New Hampshire primaries are tomorrow. The traveling circus to the White House will provide us with an endless list of more lighthearted material we'll be bringing to you every week. So don't forget to subscribe to the podcast in iTunes. Leave us a quick rating, please. That helps you because you get the new episodes downloaded automatically, and it helps us because it makes our ratings go up. So follow us on Twitter at False Flag Nation. Like our Facebook page for more updates, and don't forget to visit our main website at www.falseflagnation.com. We will get to work immediately on some funnier material for next week. And that is all for this week. This is Joe DeMarco signing off.
Gentlemen, have a good week.